On July 26, Chinese workers from China National Chemical Engineering's No. 7th Construction Group, CC7, clashed with locals at the Baltic Sea gas chemical complex project in Russia.
This stuff is too expensive. It almost came to blows. Look at all these people.
The cause of the conflict was that Chinese workers were selling cheap food at the construction site and was then discovered by Russians. According to the workers, the food supply for the project had been monopolized by Russians, leading to sky-high food prices. Think about it. Pro-Russian people constantly say we should treat Russia like family, but in reality, while you treat them like brothers, they see you as competition. They enjoy overpriced meals while watching you sell cheap food, and in the end, you get called a lapdog. It's crazy how quickly things turn around. A blogger pointed out that the project is built by Chinese workers in Russia and is touted as the largest ethylene integration project in the world, but even eating a meal here has turned into a fight, making the pro-Russia stance a joke. The Baltic Sea gas chemical complex project in Russia is an important overseas project under China's Belt and Road Initiative. It is located near the small town of Ust-Luga on the Finnish Gulf. The contractor for the project is China National Chemical Corporation's wholly owned subsidiary, China National Chemical Engineering's No. 7th Construction Group, or CC7. On October 11, 2019, CC7 signed a contract with Russian firms worth approximately 12 billion euros. The issue of Chinese workers becoming victims and fighting for their rights in Russia has occurred sporadically in recent years. According to Russian media, from October to November 2021, dozens of Chinese construction workers at an oil refinery in Khabarovsk protested over their wages, treatment, and their desire to return home. On November 12th, they even vandalized the factory office. The refinery is owned by Russian oil company Rosneft. Witnesses reported that Chinese workers threw snow blocks at the factory office, shattering several windows. They protested the delayed payment of their wages, demanded the return of their passports, and requested to be sent back to China. It was revealed that these Chinese workers were recruited by the contractor for the Amur River refinery in the town of Komsomolsk on Amur. The company explained to Russian media that the unrest was due to about 70 Chinese workers being fired for poor performance. However, due to the pandemic and the travel ban at the China-Russian border, they could not be sent back to China. On May 8, 2020, a video circulated online showing CC7 workers in Russia wanting to return to China due to the pandemic. These workers went on strike to demand repatriation for 3 consecutive days, but the Chinese authorities did not take action to help them return home. At the Omsk refinery in Russia, undertaken by CC7, is located on the outskirts of Omsk in southern Russia. The project is owned by Russia's state-owned company, Gazprom, with a contract value of approximately $420 million and a construction period of 27 months. Construction began on April 19, 2018. In May 2019, a group of Chinese construction workers went on strike at a construction site in Irkutsk, Russia, holding up banners in Russian demanding that the Russian side pay their wages. According to Russian television station OTP, the strike occurred at a construction site for a kindergarten. The project was funded by the local government, and the issue was not caused by a private construction company withholding wages from Chinese workers. The reason for the wage arrears was that the Irkutsk regional government did not disperse funds on time. In recent years, an increasing number of Russian construction projects have been carried out by Chinese workers. Projects like the Moscow Metro, the Krasnoyarsk Metro, and previous large-scale events like the Sochi Winter Olympics were all completed by Chinese workers. Even Russian construction experts admit that Chinese workers are known for their hard work, eating little, living in poor conditions, working for low wages, but working quickly and with long overtime hours, something many Russian workers cannot match. Chinese state-owned companies have many projects in Russia. The so-called China-Russia friendship known to the public originates from the friendship between the Chinese Communist Party and the Soviet Union. When the CCP was founded, it was a branch of the Third Communist International led by the Soviet Union until it was dissolved in 1943. In 1949, the CCP established its government in China, later experiencing deteriorating relations with the Soviet Union in the 1960s and a thaw in the 1980s. After the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Sino-Soviet relations were replaced by Sino-Russian relations. Over the past 30 years, China-Sino relations have become close, with Belt and Road projects becoming part of this cooperation. China political commentator Yue Shan stated that such conflicts between the peoples of China and Russia show that despite the official attempts to project an image of close friendship, deep-seated mistrust and wariness remain between the two nations' populations. In February 2011, Russian media Novaya Gazeta revealed that a group of Chinese construction workers working on Russky Island in Vladivostok were beaten by local security guards using batons. The incident occurred on January 4, 2011, when a group of Chinese workers were preparing to take alcohol back to their dormitory to celebrate Chinese New Year. They were confronted by Russian security guards who wanted the alcohol. A conflict ensued between the workers and security guards. The guards called for reinforcements, and the Chinese workers were beaten with batons by special police and rapid response team members. At the time, several Russian media outlets reported and released video footage showing Chinese workers being beaten unconscious. Witnesses captured video showing Russian special police and security guards laughing as they beat Chinese workers, saying, "Do you know whose land you're on? Let me hit him." Despite the cold weather, the Chinese workers were knocked down into the snow and dragged across it, with many forced to stand against a wall. It was commented at the time that the oppressed situation of Chinese workers in Russia is vastly different compared to the special treatment Russians receive in China. Meanwhile, the Chinese government has repeatedly stated on similar issues that it prioritizes China-Russian relations and supports Russian authorities' law enforcement actions. As a result, these Chinese workers have no avenue to appeal. If not for Russian workers uploading the footage to the internet, the international world would not have known. Interestingly, it was some Russian media outlets that exposed this incident and spoke up for the Chinese workers. There are many Chinese people in Vladivostok, and fights between Chinese and Russians are frequently reported by Russian media. On July 12, 2011, another group fight between Chinese and Russians took place in the area, where a Chinese man was severely injured and later hospitalized for 3 weeks. The incident was recorded by local residents on their mobile phones and spread on the internet. In the video, the Chinese worker can be heard cursing at Russians in Russian and threatening revenge. He shouted, "It was the Russians who started it. Come to China and we'll kill you." Vladivostok, formerly known as Haishan Wei, was Chinese territory during the Qing dynasty. In 1860, the humiliating Treaty of Beijing ceded over 1 million square meters of land to Tsarist Russia east of the Ussuri River, which included the important port of Haishan Wei. Russia later transformed Haishan Wei into a crucial hub city, renaming it Vladivostok. Under former CCP General Secretary Jiang Zemin, the CCP was involved in a scandal of ceding land to Russia, acknowledging several modern unequal treaties between China and Russia that previous Chinese governments, including the Republic of China, had refused to acknowledge. On December 9, 1999, 8 years after the collapse of the Soviet Union and during a period of Russia's weakened power, Jiang signed the China-Russia Joint Declaration with former Russian President Boris Yeltsin. This agreement fully accepted several unequal treaties, like the Aigan and Beijing treaties that was signed by the late Qing government with Tsarist Russia. It unconditionally gave Russia over 1 million square meters of Chinese land in the northeast. Jiang also handed over the Tanu-Uryankai region, which Tsarist Russia and later the Soviet Union had taken without a formal agreement. In 2002, Jiang decided to roughly divide the Soviet-occupied Bolshoi Ussuriski Island with Russia. As a result, the CCP ceded 164 square kilometers of Chinese territory to Russia. Under Xi Jinping's reign, in June 2021, China and Russia extended their Treaty of Good Neighborliness and Friendly Cooperation, which was signed 20 years ago, for another 5 years. In their joint statement, China and Russia declared that they had completely resolved historical border issues and no longer have territorial demands on each other. A Chinese scholar who wished to stay anonymous stated, "The CCP's textbooks warn students that there should be no concessions on national sovereignty and territorial integrity, but the CCP itself ceded land to Russia in the 1999 agreement." After Russia occupied Haishan Wei, they renamed the Chinese city to Vladivostok, meaning "conquer the East." The name expressed Tsarist Russia's contempt for China. Yet today, even the CCP officially refers to Haishan Wei as Vladivostok. On September 4, 2024, Chinese Vice President Han Zheng was invited to Vladivostok to attend a meeting. He said during a meeting with Russian President Putin that he was very pleased to be invited to Vladivostok and stated that China actively supports and participates in the development cooperation in Russia's Far East region. The CCP often claims that Taiwan has always been Chinese territory to seize the narrative. However, Haishan Wei also has always been Chinese territory. After Jiang Zemin handed Haishan Wei over to Russia, the CCP openly acknowledged that Haishan Wei is Russian territory. In 2024, Taiwan President Lai Ching-te stated in an interview, "China's intention to annex Taiwan is not about territorial integrity. If it truly were about territorial integrity, why doesn't China reclaim the land taken by Russia through the Eigen Treaty?" Lai's comments sparked strong reactions internationally. On August 1, 2025, China's state media Xinhua News reported on the joint naval exercise between China and Russia, stating that the exercise opened on August 1 at a military port in Vladivostok. The absurd scene of Chinese and Russian military ships conducting joint exercises in Haishan Wei unfolded. The fact that the Chinese Navy participated in exercises to help Russia defend its territory is, in fact, a national disgrace and a grave irony. In fact, not only are Chinese workers discriminated against in Russia, but informed sources have disclosed that Russian government investment policies also show that private Chinese investors are in a difficult position there.
我都说过180回了，不要上俄罗斯来投资，不要上俄罗斯来投资，尤其是重。
I've said it 180 times. Don't invest in Russia, especially in heavy assets. A friend messaged me saying he has some money and wants to invest it in a large oil refinery in Russia and heard Russian soybeans are cheap this year. They are indeed cheap, but the beans are harvested but can't be sold. I still stand on this point. Don't throw your money into Russia.
In December 2024, a man who invested in building a factory in Russia released a video advising others not to invest there. He said that when setting up a factory in Russia, the legal entity must be under the name of a Russian, and all the factory equipment is under Russian ownership. The Russian side doesn't care if you make money. All rent, taxes, and fees must be paid on time. The man pointed to his factory and explained that it was built by the first factory manager in 2009, costing about 9 million yuan. By 2017, he quit, and it was said that he couldn't recover the costs. Nothing could be taken, as all the equipment was under Russian ownership. Then the second boss took over, but didn't make money and left. Now, as the third boss, he hasn't done well either, because the rent and taxes are too high.
Over the past 20 years, no Chinese have made money here. Who made money? The Russians and the factory owners. Do we Chinese have a habit of investing in Russia?
However, the CCP elites have been able to make huge profits in Russia. After Xi Jinping took office, China and Russia have shown a so-called back-to-back cooperative stance in recent years. On February 24, 2022, after Xi and Putin issued a joint statement declaring that China and Russia's friendship has no limits and cooperation has no restricted areas, Putin ordered the invasion of Ukraine less than a month later. Over the past 3 years, China has become Russia's largest energy buyer and has supplied Russia with equipment and components for military production. The two countries' cooperation in trade, diplomacy, military, and propaganda has significantly upgraded, and CCP elites have also used the opportunity to send associates to Russia to amass wealth. In May 2025, Xi Jinping visited Moscow to attend the 80th anniversary of the World War II victory celebrations, showcasing the China-Russia alliance against the U.S. Xi called China and Russia inseparable neighbors, unbreakable friends, and reliable partners. However, looking back at the history of China-Russian relations, there are many examples of enmity. Among the powers that invaded China, Russia is the only one that permanently occupied Chinese territory. Historically, China and the U.S. have never been enemies, but the CCP has opposed the U.S. due to ideological differences. Ironically, Lenin, who is still revered as a great figure in China, has become a rejected figure in Russia. A video shows a Lenin impersonator being beaten in St. Petersburg. Now, almost all Lenin statues in the former Soviet republics have been torn down. Despite Putin visiting Beijing in September this year to attend the military parade and attempting to highlight the close ties between the two countries, some subtle changes are occurring. On August 15th this year, U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Putin met in Anchorage, Alaska, to discuss how to end the Russia-Ukraine war. While both sides indicated that they had not reached a substantial agreement, both believed progress had been made. The next steps remain to be seen. Russia's situation on the battlefield has not been easy, and its economy has already dipped into the red in 2025. The GDP growth rate for the first quarter dropped sharply from around 4% for the previous year to 1.4%. The 2025 budget, which was passed in November last year, had to be significantly revised, with the fiscal deficit expected to expand from the original 1.2 trillion rubles, which was 0.5% of GDP, to 3.8 trillion rubles, which is 1.7% of GDP. China political expert Wang He wrote in an article that Trump's rise to power was a godsend for Russia. If Putin had been wise enough, he should have teamed up with Trump to extricate himself from the quagmire of the Russia-Ukraine war. Unfortunately, Putin was influenced by a bad friend, the CCP. The CCP claims neutrality, but in reality supports Russia. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte clearly stated that the CCP has become a decisive enabler of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The US and the EU have imposed sanctions on several Chinese companies, banks, and others supporting Russia. Ukrainian authorities have also reported multiple times on this. On July 2nd this year, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi revealed in a one-on-one meeting with EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy Kaja Kallas that the CCP could not afford Russia's defeat on the Ukrainian battlefield, as that would mean the US would shift its full attention to Beijing. Clearly, Beijing is trying to use Russia as a pawn. Wang He clearly leaked a secret, as Western media reporters later pressed the matter at a press conference with China's foreign ministry. Chinese spokesperson Mao Ning claimed China's position is objective and impartial, and the international community can see that. This clearly contradicted what Wang had previously said. Wang He stated that the CCP's diplomatic, economic, and technical support for Russia can be cut off, and if Russia realizes the true malice of the CCP, undergo a substantial change, and the deadlock of the Russia-Ukraine war may be broken.